In chapter 18, verse 1 and 2, the priests, the Levites, all the tribe of Levi shall have no part nor inheritance with Israel. Boy, you've got to stop and absorb that a minute. You've got the 12 tribes of Israel, and Levites aren't one of them. If you counted them as a tribe, which you're not supposed to, it would be the 13th tribe. 13 is the number of victory, of triumph. But it's replaced. Remember Joseph, the guy with the coat of many colors, got 2 tribes out of the deal, Ephraim and Manasseh. But the Levites would be cut out as counted as a tribe. So they will not have an inheritance. They're not going to be given a portion of the land. You got the land of Dan and the land of Naphtali and the land of Ephraim and the land of the Levites. No, there is no such thing. So they shall eat the offering of the Lord made by fire and his portion. Therefore, they shall have no inheritance among their brethren. One of the favorite things in the Bible I love. The Lord is their inheritance, as he said to them. And isn't that the way we're to live? In this world, but not of it. The earth is the Lord's and all that's in it. He's given it to us. You're possessor of all things, of heaven and earth, he says at the end of 1 Corinthians 3. But yet we really have nothing but for a vapor of time. But the Lord is our inheritance while we live. We looked at this back in chapter 18 of Numbers. Verse 8 and 9, it says, the Lord spoke to Aaron, here I myself have also given you charge of my heave offerings. All the holy gifts of the children of Israel, I have given them as a portion to you and your sons, as an ordinance forever. This shall be yours and your most holy thing reserved from the fire. Every offering of theirs, every grain offering, every sin offering, every trespass offering, which they render to me shall be most holy to you and your sons. So he makes it clear that each of these offerings that are made to the Lord, a portion of that, and again, if you look at it, they're sort of the guys got to do it all. They got to hoist that thing up. They got to bleed it. They got to gut it. They got to take the hide off it. They got to take all the guts out of it. They got to cut it down in proportions. They were quite the butchers. And these guys, I don't think, were wimps. They didn't have to work out in the field all day. But I think they were pretty strong dudes. That's why we see that the priesthood, you only did it from 30 to 50. Up to 30, you were being tutored from 25 to 30. And then after 50, you were sort of, again, the tutorer to help out. So you were there helping out and guiding and directing and telling everybody what to do. My mother-in-law is a Levite. I don't have the DNA to prove that, but I'm pretty sure she is. Anyway, she just turned 90 on Sunday. Pretty exciting stuff. And of course, I asked her, I said, you know, that's when Sarah had a baby, it was at 90. What do you think about that? She laughed. And I said, well, that's what Sarah did. She laughed also. So, well, anyway, verse 3 through 5. And this shall be the priest's due. This is what they're owed from the people. From those who offer a sacrifice, whether it is bull or sheep, they shall give it to the priest, the shoulder, the cheeks, the stomach, the first fruits of your grain, the first fruits of your new wine, the first fruits of your oil, the first of the fleece of your sheep, you shall give him. And then in verse 5, for the Lord your God has chosen him out of all the tribes to stand to minister in the name of the Lord, him and his sons forever. So you say, man, these priests, they don't get anything. They're cut off from having their own portion, their own land. But yet the Lord is saying, as they serve me, there's all kinds of things that can still come their way. Interesting, here is the only place where it says the fleece of the sheep are yours. He does say in Numbers 18:12, all the best of the oil, all the best of the new wine and the grain and their first fruits, which they offered to the Lord, I have given them to you. So these guys were to get the quality of the best of the portion as of the tithe that they gave. Now, you're going to go on, we're going to discover that the tithe was 100% their salaries. On top of that tithe, they had various offerings. Some were later to the temple, some were to the poor, and so forth. So there was more than just the 10%. But that 10% in the Old Testament was simply for the salaries of the Levites. Again, there were lots of them as well. But I also might point, as I did last week, the job wasn't just the tabernacle. A part of what the Levites did was be the civil leaders of the city as well. They were judges and the people that helped be mayors, if you would, of the city to take care of it. That was part of their job. Also, we see later on in 2 Chronicles 31:5, we see the people doing exactly this. As soon as the commandment was circulated, the children of Israel brought in abundance the first fruits of the grain and the wine and the oil and the honey and all the produce of the field. And they brought it abundantly, the tithe of everything. And so they brought it all in. Uniquely here, it says the fleece, the skins of these animals were for the priests. Now, what we will discover later on is that the priests were not held back from owning things. So, example, you had the various cities and the cities of refuge. They could buy a nice, townhouse, apartment, condo, whatever you want to call it, within the city, and they did. And just like today, back then, property was at a premium in the walls of the city. There's some of the highest property values you can find. And so they had wealth in those condos in the city walls that they owned. Then outside, we're going to discover, outside the city walls, they were to be given a portion of the land for their sheep and cattle, and even to have a garden or whatever they wanted there. So we'll discover that as we go through that, Solomon says to one of the priests that he wasn't happy at, go to your fields. So he had bought fields somewhere. And then later Jeremiah gets a prophecy to tell his cousin to go buy some land. And he was a priest. So they did have wealth and they did do things with their wealth. But in the New Testament, Paul has a reasoning on why the spiritual leaders should be financially taken care of. And 2 Corinthians 11, 7-9, did I commit sin in humbling myself that you might be exalted because I preached the gospel to God to you free of charge? I robbed other churches, taking wages from them to minister to you. And when I was present with you and in need, I was a burden to no one. For what I lacked, the brethren who came from Macedonia supplied, and in everything I kept myself from being burdensome to you, and so I will keep myself. Paul had a unique ministry, which he didn't know if he was going to be somewhere for 1 week or 3 years. And so he didn't want the gospel defamed by it seeming like, oh, Paul went here and they really blessed him, but he only went there for a short time because they didn't give him very much. So the more money you give Paul, the longer he'll stay in your city. They didn't want that. So he never took money from where he was at, but he made tents. He had his own company, and those with him would work for him. But also he would get offerings from other churches that would send him from afar. God would put on their heart to support his evangelistic efforts. But to the church there, he would say, give it to the elders, give it to the pastors. I'm just an evangelist, apostle coming through. He talks about this also in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 3-6. My defense to those who examine me is this: do we not have the right to eat and drink? Do we have no right to take along with us believing wives? There you go. As do also other apostles, the brothers of the Lord, and Cephas. So many of the apostles, including Peter and Jude and James, they all had wives that traveled with them. Paul was a Pharisee. One of the rules to be a Pharisee is you had to be married. So evidently, without the Bible talking about it, Paul probably his wife probably divorced him when he became a Christian. Probably her family put that pressure, but he stayed single after that. Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working? He goes on in verse 7, whoever goes to war. So this is his first thought. Those who are working in the church are like a soldier at war. Whoever is to war at his own expense, who plants a vineyard and does not eat of its fruit, or who tends a flock and does not drink of the milk of the flock. Do I say these things as mere men, or do not the law say the same? So he says a soldier, or a guy who owns a vineyard, or a guy who has cattle and sheep and whatever. Each of those guys in their venue, the soldier, the vineyard owner, or the guy who has cattle and sheep, they all partake of the fruits of what they're doing. And in verse 9 to 12, he says, as it's written in the law of Moses. Okay, here we go. You shall not muzzle out an ox while it treads out the grain. So when the ox is walking in a circle and pulling the big apparatus, they got a plate and it's got holes in the plate that's metal and it's going over the wheat, taking away the wheat from the chaff. Those little things pop. When the plate, like a piano bench size, but it has a metal plate on the bottom with holes in it. So when it rubs across the wheat that they lay down, that's dried, the bud of the wheat will pop away from the chaff. And it does, it pops. And so some of it goes into the path of the ox, probably good substantial. So while the ox is walking around, when it gets hungry, it just bends down and eats some of that wheat that popped loose from the chaff. And he's saying, don't put a muzzle on the ox so it can't reach down and eat from the fruits of its labor. And then it goes on to say, is it an ox that God's concerned about? Is this what God's really talking about, is taking care of ox? He has a special law just for ox? No, not at all. For does not he say altogether for our sakes, no doubt, that these written, that he who plows should plow in hope, and those who thresh in hope should be partaker of his hope. If we have sown spiritual things for you, is it great thing if we reap our material things? If others have partakers of this right over you, are we not even more so? Nevertheless, we've not used this right, but endure all things, lest we hinder the gospel of Christ. So he's saying, well, we don't support Paul and Barnabas and those guys, so why should we support our local pastors? And Paul is saying, no, we're sort of a unique category. And yes, the example I gave you up front was not receiving tithes and offerings from you, even when you offered them, because of this unique call that I and Barnabas have. But I wasn't meaning that you continue that after I left for your future pastors. And this is the point he's making. In verse 13 and 14 of 1 Corinthians 9, do you not know that those who minister the holy things, here it is, talking about our Deuteronomy 18 here, do you not know those who minister the holy things of the temple, those who serve at the altar, partake of the offerings of the altar? Even so, the Lord committed that those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. So now he gave us the soldier, he gave us the vineyard owner, he gave us the guy who has cattle and sheep. He's given any way you look at this. But of course, last but not least, is if this was the mind of God in the Old Testament, under the law for the priest, God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He would have the same concept for the New Testament sort of priest, if you would, but not really, spiritual leader, to also be able to be financially taken care of. Galatians 6:6, I think, says it best to this sort of carnal church of Galatia. He just says, well, I'm not going to give you any in-depth command on this. Just let him who has taught the word share all good things with him who teaches. I'll just leave it at that. And So again, I think that this is the point he's making to the children of Israel to help them understand that it's not just the spiritual act of tithing unto the Lord, but it also has an earthly, practical necessity of taking care of God's servants. And me and Dennis and Kirk, our board, were talking about that jet that I've been using since I've moved here. I have to stop halfway across the United States to fill it up. And I need one of those kind of jets that'll get me all the way to the East Coast without having to stop. So, those are some things I'll never understand. I'm kidding. The jet we have is fine. Well, verse 6 through 8 now. So if the Levites come from any of your gates, from where he dwells among all Israel, comes with all the desire of the mind to the place which the Lord chooses. We know ultimately that's Jerusalem, right? There's going to be a couple other places they camp out once they get to Israel, but the final place is Jerusalem. So you have a guy who's living in one of the cities of refuge, or he's living in a city and he's the Levite out with whatever tribe. But he's got a ministry there. He's doing great there. But God gives him into his heart this calling to go and minister in the place that God's chosen, to stay at the tabernacle. Now, later the temple. He says here, if that's his desire, then he may serve in the name of the Lord his God as all the brethren, the Levites do, who stand there before the Lord. They shall have equal portion to eat besides what comes from the sale of his inheritance. So what we discover here is that he doesn't get paid more. Okay, so it's not a promotion, but he doesn't get paid less either. It does not financially benefit him. But I'll tell you, when you look at the history of Israel before they got to Jerusalem, which wasn't that much very long in the history of Israel being in the land of Israel, it was in very difficult places where that tabernacle was. It was not a comfortable place to be. It was not an easy place to be. And when we see little pictures of it, like when David went to Nob to inquire, to talk to the priest and have shelter. And then they found out he was fleeing from Saul. He's like, well, what do you got? He goes, oh, we got some bread that you were getting ready to change out. That's for the priest. You can have that. And we got the sword that you gave unto the Lord. It sounds like David came to a place going, I can't keep this sword of Goliath. It's an idol to me. And at some point in his worship, he came to the tabernacle and gave this sign of great victory that could be pride to him to the Lord. And so they had it stashed somewhere, this great sword of Goliath. And he says, well, we can give you that back if you want that. And David said, yeah, I'll take it. And he took the bread for him and his men. But it didn't seem like a very good place. And of course, later Saul came and said, you're all betrayed me and killed everybody. So it seems like you would have gone maybe for a time, maybe for a season. When we look at the Gospel of Luke, Zechariah and Elizabeth, that's what it seems like. That they had an allotment. It says the lot fell to them. And that lot was them going to Jerusalem to serve for X amount of time. One thing I have a couple pastors that want to do, I've actually would love to do it, is, you know where the Garden Tomb is in Jerusalem? Pastors are the ones who work there and take care of it. So you can actually fill out an application. It's to this group in England that run it, and ask them if you can work there. And you work in the shop. You also give tours, and you help keep up the property, and you can do that for several months. They got a place for you to stay. That'd be pretty cool, you know. But it seems like it was more in shifts in that way. But, you know, ultimately, for those, maybe some young guy that wants to go to Jerusalem, he takes his whole family and moves there. It'd be very expensive to do that. most of the time. But he says it's not everybody has this calling. But those who have this calling to be next to the tabernacle or be next to the temple and serve there at the epicenter, go for it. Absolutely. We want you to do that very thing. That's it. Now, we're going to see where God's been saying, don't be a part of the abominations of the lands that were before you. But now he's going to get into specifics. So tonight he's going to say, very detailed, using all the various methods of what kind of wicked customs people tap into the dark side, tap into listening to Satan. So in verse 9 through 11, when you come into the land which the Lord your God has given you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who takes his son or his daughter and pass through the fire, or the one who practices witchcraft or soothsaying, or one who interprets omens, or sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up from the dead. So before he says, don't be a part of their abominations, end of story. But now he's saying, you got to understand, outside of the main religion to Baal or to the female Asherahs, who both of them require that you sacrifice your baby to be burned to death at some point, don't do that. I mean, that's a no-brainer. We talked about that, he says. But equally, if it's not clear, and this is the way we are. I mean, it's always funny to me when I look at the works of the flesh in Galatians 5. It's all of these little words. The first 4 words are all on sexual impurity. You know, it says fornication, adultery, uncleanness, licentiousness, all sexual. So it's sort of like, you know, you often have young couples before they get married. It's like, how far can I go and not be in sexual sin? You know? And I've had all kinds of people say all kinds of things. How far, where can I go? So now it seems sort of like this. Oh, well, we didn't worship Baal. I was just going to a witch. I didn't worship the Asherahs. I didn't give my son to be, or my child to be burned. I was just getting my palm read. Talking to the astrologists. Did God not want that? Wow, I didn't know that. He didn't say to do that. He just said, don't be a part of the abominations. Is getting my fortune told or, getting a tarot card reading, is that really an abomination? Are we talking about the same thing here? And this is what he's saying. Yes, all of them are equally an abomination. So he says, first of all, you shall not learn. It's our natural curiosity, isn't it? It's our sinful flesh. And so I remember as a kid, I grew up in a denomination, we could never go to the circus. It was in the bylaws. When I asked people from our old denomination if they believed that was in the manual, the church manual of our denomination, they'd say, no, I don't think that's in there. It's in there, man. But I remember as a kid going, and I thought, this place creeps me out. I mean, I didn't know good or bad. It's just, hey, there's a circuit in town, and they had a tent set up, and, it just seemed like an exciting night out with the family. But I walked on the thing, and I just, as a kid going, this is creepy. And, of course, they had the woman with a beard and the guy with a snake and, the Aborigine in the cage eating a snake and pulling apart dead things. But it was weird to me to hear people talking who were Christians at school, even as a little kid and even at church going, I got my palm read. Did you go to the tarot card person? Because they were all there. Oh, they got their globe and, let me take the thing off. Oh, I'm looking into your future. And I remember as a little kid, I was just an innocent little 6-year-old or whatever going, how could you do that? How could you cross that line of wanting to even do that? But now, was it curious when I walked by? Oh yeah, I was very curious to peek inside see how she's reading the palm, or look at the tarot cards. And it was all very intriguing. It is to this day. It's just an intriguing thing, the dark side, so to speak. Satan has good merchandise. Nobody has ever said he doesn't have good merchandise to sell, whether it's satanic music or whether it's clothes that are not appropriate or ways to think. I was surprised at the president's speech last night where he said, we're going to create a country where boys are boys and girls are girls, and you're not going to transition little kids. And not one Democrat would clap on that. And Trump was looking at these people like, what? You're not clapping for that? But my thoughts are the Democratic Party are Satanist. These guys, we've got to pray for them. Not they'll become more conservative. We've got to pray that they get out of Satanism. And so, anyway, yes, I'm a Republican. If that, you didn't get that, but even that, I don't know if I'm a Republican much longer. They're sort of the Democrats. They're just calling themselves Republicans, I think. But anyway, so you got the real serious group that are so crossover into Satanism, he says here, that they're doing the full bore, even having their babies at the fire. But equally as wicked, and he breaks it down. He first mentions witchcraft. Literally, the word here is to whirl around arrows in a quiver. We see it in Ezekiel 21 mentioning this. For the king of Babylon stands at the parting of the road and at the fork of two roads to use deviation. He shakes the arrows. He consults the images. He looks at the liver. So in this witchcraft, they will take bones and shake them up and look at what the bones do. Or they'll take the liver or the intestines of an animal and they'll decipher from looking at the entrails of the animal. Or in this case, you take the arrows, and as you throw the arrows down and they make a shape, then it gives you direction. The next thing he says is soothsayers. Soothsayer is an astrologist type person, but it's focused on using the stars, the planets, the clouds, the weather to seek to know the future, for future guidance. They look for physical signs. It's astrology. They look at, yes, the reading of the clouds, or it's interesting, the actual Arabic word for this soothsaying is the word noises or groan or hum. Or, have you ever seen that on a TV where you got some medicine man, something weird? This is what it's saying. That's the actual word. So why they're sort of in this chanting position. But if you would today, it would be the zodiac. Hey, what's your sign? Jesus Christ dying and raising again on the third day. Well, come on. What's your sign? The nails in Jesus' hands that were pierced for me. Don't play these games. I don't know what your sign is, and I'm not going to ask. And if somebody asks, do not play into it. It may seem like a game to you, but it's not a game to Satan. Where was Satan in the garden? He got as pretty as he could. I wonder if he was a different type of animals. And then finally, he got the prettiest one. He got the one that worked. He possessed the animal that worked, the most beautiful one that enticed Eve. And then what? He was ready to have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. Oh, man, okay, let's talk. Eve, a woman, of course. Adam, I've been on this earth 20 years with you, and you've only talked to me, 100 words. I don't know how it would have worked out, actually. But either way, Eve was ready to talk. Satan's more than happy to talk to you. He would love to talk to you. He'll appear as an angel of light to talk to you. He will find the most interesting, intriguing ways to talk to you. Astrology, the reading of your horoscope, the studying of the signs, computing natal charts, the cult of astrology, to know the knowledge of hidden things. The next thing we see, or to interpret, omens. The actual root of this word omen is the word to hiss or to whisper. It's by the psychic foretellers, and they are aided to gain knowledge or tell the future or cast spells. We would say today these are the tarot card readers, the crystal ball seers, the tea leaf readers, the palm readers, the Ouija board users. I remember as a youth pastor, I had some kids going, yeah, we went to this friend's house and they had a Ouija board and it worked. I've heard that so many times as a youth pastor. I'm like, I know it worked. Well, why? You believe in Ouija boards? I believe in a real devil who would like to do anything he can to talk to you. Yeah, he wants to talk to you. He wants to intrigue you. He wants to lead you into darkness. And those, hedonistic, non-Christian words in those songs are talking about immorality. They're talking about suicide. They're talking about hating God and dishonoring God. There was a pastor the other day, and he was telling me about his kids that are not walking with the Lord right now. They were listening to this Christian band that used to be a Christian band because of Calvinism. They basically said, if I'm chosen, I'm chosen, and I'll get to heaven because God I'm chosen. Doesn't matter if I live for God or not, I guess. And anyway, they just hate, and the song was this. You didn't know the words unless you read it. It said, I hope Jesus comes back so I can kill him. And it goes into very graphic detail how they wanted to cut him up into pieces and kill him. These guys, yeah, and these are the things that their kids had. Oh, this is a Christian band, sort of. Oh, okay, it must be okay. But absolutely dark and demonic. And so I just want to say that Satan may lie and he can tell you your future. He cannot tell the future. Only God can. In Isaiah 46, 9 through 10, remember the former days of old. I am God. There is no other. Count them up. For I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning. From ancient times, things that are yet to be done. My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Satan lies. He may manipulate things to make it appear that he was able to tell you the future. Oh, I think you're going to make somebody dark and handsome, and then you get beat up in an alley by a guy that's dressed in black. It's like, I guess he was good looking. I couldn't see under the thing, but it must have been because I was told he, yeah. In 2 Thessalonians 2, 8 and 9, and then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord consumes with the breath of his mouth and destroys the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to, notice, the working of Satan with all power, signs, and what? Lying wonders. So I'm not saying these guys don't have power. Satan has a lot of power if God allows his power to be used. Most of the time it's limited. Well, the next thing we have on the list is the sorcerer. And this is by the use of drugs, perfumes. In some of these cases, people would come in and they would have the perfumes in the air or incense burning, and then all of a sudden they're affected and they're having this spiritual experience inside the tent of the soothsayer or the sorcerer, or they get touched by them and it goes into their skin, so the time they begin to have this experience. In Galatians 5, verse 19 to 20, now the works of the flesh are evidence, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, and what? Sorcery. The King James actually translates this witchcraft. It is the word pharmakia, where we get our word pharmacy from. So this sorcery, pharmakia, it is by the use of drugs. And I've had people who have done binges on marijuana to other drugs, and they have the wildest experiences. And, non-Christians, they tell me, they're like going, you're missing out, Bryan. I know you're a Christian, but God made marijuana, God made it all. And I'm telling you, man, when I just spend a few hours and play the right music, and I'm in this really calm place, man, I've never been closer to God than when I'm, smoking the right marijuana with the right atmosphere. And it's like, yeah, I know you feel like you're close to God, but you're actually close to a demon lying spirit. It's a demonic thing, and Satan comes as an angel of light. And so then he also says the next thing is the one who conjures up spells. And again, Satan can seem to be good here by saying, I'll trim up the smell to make that person fall in love with you, or that, for something good to happen, for you to get the promotion or whatever. But it's from the spiritual powers of Satan. Do you want the promotion because Satan helped you get the promotion? Do you think the end of that story is going to be good? Do you think that person falling in love with you because Satan went out and started playing with their mind and manipulating them is going to end up with a good story at the end? It's always and forever wrong to use demonic, dark, pagan, or occult powers to cast spells or charms, good or bad. And then the medium is the next one. This is literally the one who stands between. The one who stands between the physical world and the psychic world, or the spiritual world. In Leviticus 20, verse 7, a man or a woman who's a medium, or one who has familiar spirits, shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones, and the blood shall be upon them. Some people try to say, my kid, this happened to them. It started when they were 5 years old. And they could see into the spiritual realm. This is a gift from God. It's like, remember the New Testament? The one woman who came to Jesus saying, my daughter is demon possessed and I can't do anything about it. Do you remember that story? I think she was probably some kind of medium, and the demon's like, hey, I don't think I'll possess you today. I think I'll possess your daughter instead. Because the parents are the covering of those kids. And then, of course, she couldn't undo it. We see the one man who came to the apostles, and his son was being thrown into the water to be drowned, into the fire to be burned. And it had such a strong hold on these children that even the apostles couldn't get out the demon. Do you remember that? So the dark side of these fun little horoscopes, they're sitting around the house, and these fun little tarot cards, is you may end up putting your child in a deeper bondage. You may not even realize it. I think a lot of people that are totally possessed by the devil, i.e. the Democratic Party for the most part now, they have no idea they're being puppeted by Satan. They think they are morally superior by trying to help little kids become the opposite sex. Did you hear this week a guy in Norway or Sweden, I can't remember which one, but he fought so his 10-year-old child wouldn't get hormones and so forth to become a girl. They arrested him. He's under charges now, and they permanently took the child away from him. That's their mind. Their mind of righteousness is, this 10-year-old kid wants to be a girl. Obviously, they know the best, what's best for them. You can't deny that what's best for them. Good is evil and evil is good. In Isaiah 29:4, we see this in its whisperings. You shall be brought down. You shall speak out of the ground. Your speech shall be low, out of the dust. Your voice shall be like a medium out of the ground, and your speech shall whisper. There it is, the word medium, out of the dust. This spiritus standing between the dead and the living, between the two worlds, necromancy, if you would. The one who calls up the dead. We know that story of Saul, right? Where he went to the witch of Endor. It's always interesting. I know the first time I was watching one of the Star Wars shows, and they went to these little creatures in the woods, and they were mediums. But it was Endor. They went to Endor. And when I first heard that, I'm like, and then you start looking at Star Wars, they have a lot of very different names that we don't really take a look at in the Bible. They're all throughout, giving a message. And so he went there, and eventually the widow was said, can you call up Samuel? The great Samuel. And she calls it up, and she screams, and she's like, this isn't my familiar spirit. This really is Samuel. And God allowed it. And it's very interesting because it says he came out of the earth. And here it talks about in Isaiah how they come from the ground and whisper from the dust. And this is exactly what happened is down in Sheol in the holding place. And God even allowed this demonic lady to have success to rebuke King Saul. Verse 12 through 14. For all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord. Because of these abominations, the Lord your God drives them out from before you. You shall be, listen, blameless before the Lord your God. For these nations which you dispossess listened to the soothsayers. They listened to the diviners. But as for you, the Lord has not appointed such for you. So the pagan nations before you, you know what? This is why I drove them out. I'm giving you all these things. Oh, I don't worship Baal. I do my own little medium thing over here in my tent. Oh, we don't worship the Asherahs. Over in our village here, we just do the tarot cards, and we have our own little witch in our village here. We don't partake with the main Canaanite religion whatsoever. We have our own personal little witch over here. He's saying you're going to find a smorgasbord, okay? So if you're starting to be interested, you're going to find 1,000 different religions. You're going to find 100 different nuances to those religions. You're going to find the bones and the livers and the arrows, and then you're going to find a crystal ball. Then they're going to start showing you the stars and take 3 years to explain to you through astrology how the devil's speaking to them. And this is what they did. These are the people that I vomited out of the land. But for you, I've never appointed such a thing. When I envisioned you coming into the promised land, I never wanted that to happen in villages or towns or in portions of the country at all. Not just the big Baal worship of the Canaanites, but I'm talking all the individual spiritists. You are to be blameless. You're to have nothing to do with it. You know, I love it when you see people get born again and instantly, without anybody saying anything to them, they just start making changes. I remember back when I was in college, and Josh McDowell was talking about a young man that got saved. It was a 3-day thing that Josh was doing at San Diego State. And the first night, this one young man, basketball player, football player, got radically saved. And he came back the next night, and he just like, I went home, and my girlfriend was there, and I just couldn't be with her. I couldn't sleep in the same bed. And she's come tonight. I hope she can say, but I don't know what I'm going to do is I can't keep living there anymore. Nobody said, don't fornicate, don't commit. It was just, I remember in the Eastern Bloc countries when we first went there, and it was in September and October in the winter months, and we had all kinds of retreats and had guest speakers, and it was just amazing to see these young people come out of communism. Had so many questions, and then to come into Christianity. But the summer was coming around. Girls didn't own tops. Okay? All the beaches were nudist beaches there. And what are these Christian girls going to do? Without saying anything, they dressed modestly. And they got grief. The city didn't like it. The people, their friends, didn't like the fact that they weren't going topless. And they were mocking them and persecuting them over it. But it was just interesting. And in the book of Acts, you think, oh, I became a Christian, but at home, I still got my whatever book, whatever magazine. I got my bones still in my bag at home. Well, this is what happened. They came and they got saved in Acts 19 there in Ephesus. And what happened? As many, in verse 19 and 20, as many of those who had practiced magic brought their books together, burned them all in the sight of all. And they counted up the value of them, totaled 50,000 silver pieces. Guess that was a lot of money. So the word of the Lord grew mightily and prevailed. Again, nobody putting the law on them. They just knew, I've come to the light, and this dark thing that we have at home has to end. Well, now it's interesting because we come to chapter 18 and verse 15, and now we see the contrast. He's saying here, this isn't what I wanted for you. None of these demonic things. But it's not like I have nothing for you. What I have for you is far superior than anything the devil has. What does God have to speak to us? He says in verse 15 through 19, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst. From your brethren, him you shall hear. According to all you desired of the Lord your God in Oreb, the day of the assembly, saying, let me hear again the voice of the Lord. Let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, nor let me see his great fire anymore, lest I die. And the Lord said to me, what they have spoken is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all I command him. Now listen to this. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, he speaks in my name, I will require it of him, or bring judgment on him. So in contrast, yes, all these things are enticing. All these things are interesting. All these things are unique. All these things are sort of cool to see, all the various soothsayers and witches and potions and how they dress and how they've tattooed themselves and the smoke and the fire and the different potions and a lot of them worked. Put a curse on a guy and he got fired. I asked for the raise and I got it. Yeah, these guys, they really work, man. We really want them. He goes, yeah, but not for you. They're using Satan, and more Satan using them. They just don't know it. But they're using the demonic realm to curse people or to bless themselves, but not for you. So it's almost saying, I know Satan, and he's going to give you counterfeits. Don't play into his counterfeits. Wait by faith for the genuine. If you know anything about the devil, that's what he wants. He wants to give you 1,000 counterfeits, all exactly what you want or better. So when the real comes, you have no more appetite. Right? He'll give you 1,000 different types of boxes of donuts, so when the steak comes, you have no interest in eating the steak. Interesting, this is exactly what happened during the time of Christ. We learn this in Acts chapter 5 when they're persecuting the apostles. And remember, they beat them and then they threw them in prison in Acts 5, but the Lord supernatural let them out of prison that night. And the next day they're going to have their councils waiting to, yell at them. And he said, the prison is empty. Well, where are those guys? I'm trying to find them. Oh, well, I don't need to look. They're right outside preaching. They're Jesus. You told them not to preach. And these Sadducees and Pharisees were fuming. Bring them in here. And a Pharisee amongst them, Gabriel, who happened to be one of the teachers of Saul, the Apostle Paul, he says, hold it a minute. Let me talk to you guys first. Now, most of you have been around long enough to remember. This is not the first time we've seen this. It wasn't that long ago when there was this guy, Thaddeus, he says, that rose up, claimed to be somebody, and numbers, hundreds of men joined him, and they followed him. But when that guy died, his followers disappeared. And then after him, there was another guy, this is interesting, a Judas from Galilee. Boy, Satan just knows how to parallel it, doesn't he? And he also had this great, even a bigger following. But then after he perished, his guys disappeared. But this guy, Jesus, his followers, we put him to death. And Christianity, or the followers of Jesus, are more than ever. He said, I'm thinking now that this is how the Messiah was to come, and it may have happened. And so you may find yourself fighting against God himself. You better take care. But it just showed me the mindset of that day. When Jesus showed up teaching, they're like, I've been here, done that. But he's from Galilee. Aren't they all? But they had a lot of followers. Yeah, we've seen this before. This is white noise, man. It doesn't do anything for me. I'm not going to follow. I did follow that guy Thaddeus, and man, that was a horrible experience. Then later I followed Judas, and that was even worse. I am not going to do it a third time and follow some guy from Nazareth. Satan knows what's going on, doesn't he? He has a good guesstimate from the word and times and seasons of what God's going to do. But what does God say? Just one. I'm not giving you 1,000 different voices. I'm going to give you one voice. He's going to be very similar to Moses. He's going to mediate from God on your behalf and your behalf to God. It's going to be powerful. That remember when God was speaking, you're like, don't let God speak anymore. Just you, Moses, speak. This is what you're going to want. You're going to want this person to speak. And it's not going to cause fear. It's going to cause you to go, yes, this is the truth. And there's a bite in it. If you don't do what he says, then you're going to find destruction. In the time when Jesus came, it's amazing how many times people were clearly seeking that prophet. John the Baptist was asked this very question. In John 1:21, they asked him, what then? Are you Elijah? And he said, no, I'm not. Are you the prophet? He answered, no. And then a few verses later in John 1:25, well, then why are you baptizing if you're not Christ or Elijah or the prophet? And then Philip, the follower of Jesus, when he was told to come and follow this guy, he quickly found Nathan and said, we have found him of whom Moses and the law and also all the prophets wrote. It's Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. He is this one, fulfilling that prophecy of Moses there in chapter 18. Many people in the days of Jesus recognized him as a prophet. In John 6:14, then those men who had seen the sign that Jesus did said, this truly is the prophet who is to come into the world. In John 7:40, therefore many of the crowd, when they heard this saying, said, truly, this is the prophet. Jesus specifically said, for if you believed Moses, you would have believed me, for he wrote of me. And Peter mentions this in his sermon there when the man who was lame was healed. And he said, what are you looking at me as if I did this through my power? And then he preached the gospel. But he said in verse 22, Moses truly said to the fathers, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. Him you shall hear in all things, whatever he says to you. And it shall be that every soul who will hear that prophet every soul who will not hear that prophet shall be utterly destroyed from among the people. We know this from John, don't we? 3:18. He who believes in him, this one prophet, like Moses, who would raise up, is not condemned. But he who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. John 3:36, he who believes in the Son has everlasting life. He who does not believe the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abides on him. Not listening to Jesus is not an option. And then Stephen later in his sermon, this is that Moses who said to the children of Israel, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. Him you shall hear. And of course, what was the Pharisees, the Sadducees' response? They took him out and killed him. He was the very first martyr. But what was the thing that infuriated them was this. We are observing the prophecy from Deuteronomy 18. It's him. It's Jesus, the son of Joseph, the carpenter of Nazareth. He's the one. So it's interesting, in chapter 17 of Deuteronomy, you saw the king. And of course, Jesus is our king. And now in chapter 18, verse 1 through 8, we saw the office of the priest. And now at the end of chapter 18, we're seeing the office of a prophet. Jesus is the king. Jesus is a priest. Jesus is a prophet. Of course, Hebrews 3 tells us Jesus is greater than all of those things, right? The book of Hebrews says Jesus is greater. Well, in verse 20, we're almost done here. And the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of the gods, other gods, the prophet shall die. So I want you guys to be very, very selective. When somebody is saying they're a prophet, first thing is doubt it. That's what he says. Your first reaction shouldn't be going, oh, right, let's hear what he has to say. Oh, it's caution. Jesus said that, didn't he? In Matthew 7:15-20, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, look good on the outside, but inwardly they're ravenous wolves. You shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but bad trees bear bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear fruit, good fruit, is cut down and thrown in the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you shall know them. But an interesting nuance in this is if a prophet comes speaking and gives you a sign, and yet then he tells you to follow another god. Remember back in Deuteronomy 13? That's what happened. They came with signs and wonders that happened, but then they said, here's the message of the Lord. After seeing the great sign and wonder, let's go follow other gods. So we learn it's not just observing them on the outside, but it's listening to what they say. That takes us to the end of this book in verse 21-22. If you say in your heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not happen or come to pass, then that is a thing which the Lord has not spoken. But the prophet has spoken presumptuously, saying, this is a prophecy of God, you shall be afraid of him. So again, in Deuteronomy 13, he says, but on the other hand, you may have a guy who has the signs and wonders, but yet his words are false. Again, in 1 Corinthians 14:29, let 2 or 3 prophets speak, but let the others judge, discern. In 1 John 4:1, beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Spiritism is the way that Satan tries to not only infiltrate the world, but try to infiltrate the church. Now, I did have a whole section in here tonight on God's given apostles and prophets and evangelists. We're all members of the body of Christ, and one of those is the gift of prophecy. It says in 1 Corinthians 14, pray for spiritual gifts, but especially that you might prophesy.